at the time was terrified of mentioning the name of the person she is accused of raping her, Russell Brand. And in the notes, her therapist notes talk about that, or the medical notes talk about that, and how she was worried about her name being dragged through the mud. Mm-hmm. She was not someone who immediately started shouting a celebrity's name. It was actually the opposite. She was very worried about that being known.
For our top story today, as you know, the comedian and actor Russell Brand has been accused of rape, sexual assault and emotional abuse over a 7-year period at the height of his fame. The allegations are from a joint investigation by the Sunday Times, the Times and Channel 4 dispatchers. 4 women have come forward with allegations of rape, sexual assault between 2006 and 2013, while others have cited Brand's controlling and predatory behaviour. One of the women, Alice, whose name has been changed to protect her identity, told the Times that she was 16 when she had a 3-month relationship with Brand, who was 30 when the relationship started. She claims he sexually assaulted her and she had to punch him in the stomach to force him off her.
I think he was very skillful in the start from making his identity be, I'm the womanizer, I'm a sex addict, I'm inappropriate, but it's all just a joke, it's funny. It's, it's a smokescreen for a lot more of his dark behaviour. I've been waiting since I was 16 for it to hit the papers or for it to be on the news that he's been arrested or that somebody's reported him and it's stopped the abuse.
Now, Russell Brand has denied all the allegations and he said that the relationships were all consensual. Welcome, Paul Morgan-Bentley, Head of Investigations at The Times. Paul, thanks for joining us.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on.
Paul, we've been hearing all morning about the various allegations. What would really be interesting to hear is how investigations like this get put together, because you've been, the journalists working on this have been working on it for quite some time.
Yeah, it's a lengthy process. We take our checks incredibly seriously, and my colleagues Charlotte Wace and Rosamund Irwin have done amazing work on this story, speaking to these women. And, the first stage, after lots of people have heard these kind of rumours in the past about Russell Brand, but it's very different, obviously, rumours that go around and actually being able to prove something or having an account that's so compelling that we're able to publish it. And initially, Charlotte and Ros were able, through speaking to lots of sources and keeping in touch with people, eventually through a network of friends and contacts, being put in touch with these women. We should say none of these women knew each other before. It's not like they came together as a group, came to us and said, we want to tell our story.
And that's important in these types of investigations, isn't it? That there is no connection between all the people telling a similar type story.
It doesn't rule it out. Sometimes that women can come together and want to tell their stories together. However, I certainly found it reassuring to know that these were women who we'd spoken to separately, who didn't know each other, had never spoken to each other before. There was no chance of kind of them speaking to make sure their allegations seemed similar or anything like that. They were telling their own story. But even once we've spoken to them, and Charlotte and Ros have done amazing work in establishing that trust and relationship with these women, we then go through a series of checks. We rigorously check things. If for instance, one of the women who we have called Nadia has accused Russell Brand of raping her, and she had text messages which showed that after calling him out for his behaviour and saying that no means no, he responded with an apology, which was, incredible to see written down. But of course, we don't just take that as his text messages, even though we can see it on her phone. We check that the number in the phone definitely was his number at the time, and we check that with multiple sources, and we speak to family members and we speak to friends, and we go through a really rigorous process of checking these things.
And Nadia is also the one that I think this incident took place in Los Angeles, if I'm right, but she also went to a clinic immediately after. So there's also a medical record that you've seen in the investigation.
Yeah, and when Charlotte started talking to her, met up with her, she didn't have these medical records at first, but she then asked the clinic for them, and they had kept hold of them, obviously. And it was just incredibly compelling to read the medical notes in all their detail. She, at the time, was terrified of mentioning the name of the person she is accused of raping her, Russell Brand. And in the notes, her therapist notes talk about that, or the medical notes talk about that, and how she was worried about her name being dragged through the mud. Mm-hmm. She was not someone who immediately started shouting a celebrity's name. It was actually the opposite. She was very worried about that being known. However, it was very interesting. and this is part of the corroboration, you go through those notes, and there are lots of references to what he was doing at the time, and his ex-wife singing a song about him, and seeing him on billboards, or even at one point mentioning him performing at the London Olympics closing ceremony. And when we checked all those things, they corroborated with that time.
Now, Paul, how do investigations like this become cooperative? Because, of course, this involved three parties: the Times, the Sunday Times, and the Dispatches team. I can imagine that when you start an investigation like this, it's very much under wraps. But at what point do you realise, hang on a minute, there are several publications and a broadcaster all chasing the same story? What happens there?
Yeah, and we should say that whilst the Times and the Sunday Times are in the same building and have the same owners, we do work quite, competitively. We don't share our stories typically, and so it is quite unusual to work together in that way across news. We didn't set out to do that. I work at the Times, but very quickly when I and my colleagues started our inquiries into this story and these allegations that we were beginning to hear, we were speaking to people who said, "Oh, I've already spoken to someone from the Sunday Times." And it turned out quite quickly that actually Roz at the Sunday Times had already been looking into this. And rather than compete with each other, we decided to team up. As it happened, very unusual, it turned out actually a third organisation was also doing making very similar inquiries. So we kind of made the sensible decision that is not a very common one, but to team up. And we became this team of journalists all working on the same stories and sharing our information.
What, in your experience, happens next? There's been a huge response to the story since it broke yesterday. Of course, important to say, Russell Brand has denied all the allegations, and he's been saying and maintaining that the relationships were all consensual. Is it the case, in your experience as a journalist, when big cases like this break, that more people come forward sometimes? So the case is actually, this isn't it, it's not done. There is perhaps more life to the story yet, because more people might be encouraged, if there's anything to say, to come forward and say it.
Well, yes, you can never kind of assume that will happen, but we have an email address we've set up, investigations@news.co.uk, and we're asking people if they have any information to share it with us via that email address. But like before, if someone writes us a long email, we don't just put that in the paper, we rigorously check. So it could be that allegations come through, we check them out, and we just can't print them because, we don't feel there's enough proof, or things come through and we do all those checks and we do get to the point where we're satisfied. And then even then we go to Brand in this case for comment to make sure we have all his point of view, that he has the opportunity to respond to very specific points that we are making or that women have made. So yes, I do feel in this case we probably will be working on it for a while still.
What do you make of accusations that are coming towards the journalists in this case and everybody involved in the investigation, that this is somehow an attempt to cancel Russell Brand? It's somehow an attempt, because he's now got a very big following off what he refers to as the mainstream media. He's got his own channel, millions of followers. That this is, and again, a coordinated, this is his words, not mine, attempt to sort of go after him, because there is the Times, the Sunday Times and Dispatches. What do you have to say in response to that?
The truth is I don't have a lot to say to that. All I can say is that we're incredibly rigorous in our journalism, whether the subject is Russell Brand or an energy company or any other investigation that we're pursuing. We don't, sit around deciding who our targets are going to be, and there's kind of this conspiracy narrative. But, I can't talk to any of that because it's so far away from the truth. In reality, if we receive allegations about someone behaving in a certain way, certainly if that seems to go into allegations of criminality, we check that out incredibly rigorously. So, I'm fine with the criticisms that kind of comes with the job, but they don't worry me because I know how painstaking the work has been on this investigation.
And what happens to all this evidence? You've put it out in the public domain. Do the police get involved? Is it discretionary for the police? They make up their own mind whether they get involved or not. A lot of people are saying, okay, we know this now. What happens next?
Yeah, it's up to people who accuse someone of a sexual assault or any criminality. It's up to them whether they want to go to the police. There's been, some comments on social media and things like that. And there always are in these cases about why women don't go straight to the police. And I think that is a really interesting question, and you have to just look at conviction rates and the way women who complain about sexual assaults are treated to get some kind of insight into why that might not happen. Obviously, if any alleged victims of sexual assault want to go to the police, they can do that. In this case, the Met Police has made clear that it's keeping a close eye, that it's keen to have information. It hasn't launched kind of an official formal investigation or anything like that, but I think they're very welcome to receiving reports.